seconds, but I think everybody's here, so I'm going to call this meeting to order, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, and thank you all for coming. First up is our public comment period. We have no one who's here and who has signed up to deliver public comment, so we will move into the report of the secretary, and I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. It should be 2023. Right. All right.
Thank you, good catch.
A second, Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you. Questions or comments? I went through them and thought they were awesome. I thought they were really well done.
I didn't see anything jump out at me.
Sharpened the focus on reporting on what was done and not so much what was said. I like that. Anybody have anything? All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you. That brings us to the report of the chair. I have one thing to report on. Actually, two things. I will mention briefly that we did do our first of 3 board workshops on the budget earlier this evening. We talked about the high school, the middle school, and the athletics sort of materials and supplies budgets. Thank you to everyone who presented. For that, the board is beginning to work up a list of areas we may look at going forward for possible budget reallocation, but we'll see how that goes over the next couple of meetings. Secondly, we did have our town officials meeting on March 8th. Only the South Berwick folks were able to attend this time. And I'm going to run a real quick list here, and then, Heather, I'll ask you if I missed anything to let me know. Tim reported on the developing town budget for South Berwick. It's up about 9.9% over last year, 8.7% of that being, or there was an 8.7% COLA awarded to the employees of the town. They've had, at that point, they had the first of their 4 budget meetings, so there's still work to do. He has received a traffic light report that he was in the process of digesting and was about to release to the town council. He was a little bit close to the vest with it, but I sense that there are lights in South Berwick's future. And we'll hear about that probably at our next meeting with them.
You said that. I just.
I'm just. That was just my read of the tea leaves. Maybe I got it wrong. They've hired Port City to assess the needs around the town hall, whether to do a new town hall or to refurbish the current one. There's been an approval by the state of a revised TIF area for Punkintown, and there's a second one. I didn't catch the name of it, but it sounded like he said a transit district. I probably get that wrong. And then on the district side, of course, John did a sort of abbreviated version of the budget presentation that he did for us at our last meeting, just to bring the town up to speed. They're going to take the numbers that we have as our kind of preliminary budget and do their planning with that, but that was pretty much all I had from that. Did you have anything
Yeah,
else?
that's it.
Okay.
The one thing is that Port City is the company that was hired to do the town hall
Yep.
assessment and should be getting back soon.
Right.
That was it.
Cool.
Can I just mention one other thing? Just in a sad moment for the town of Elliott,
Yeah.
Steve Robinson, who was the director of public works for the town of Elliott, passed away suddenly. We talked about it at that meeting, but obviously feel for Steve's family and also the town of Elliott. I mean, he was a great partner. He was the person that I would speak to when it came to snow days, always very helpful, just a very, very positive person. So I just, obviously wanted to share our condolences with the town of Elliott and the Robinson family.
Mhm. Thank you. And that concludes the report of the chair and brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Okay. So I have a list of retirements, and just so you don't think it was a bad week, there's deadlines in our contracts that talk about if you retire at a certain time, there's benefits to doing that. So sad to see Pam Bates go from Marshall Great Works School. Pam has been a long-time employee. She was at the Marshall High School, and now obviously at the Great Works School. Does a fantastic job with special education, in particular special education minutes. Extremely organized, so she'll be a huge loss. Gail Simone, I think it's 39 years that she's been in the district. And so Gail is retiring. I wish her nothing but the best. I think she mentioned that she has some grandchildren that she has an opportunity to spend some time with, so just a really exciting time in her life, but just obviously indebted to the work that Gail has done over the years. Cindy Festivan is a food service worker at Central School, just a great person in the kitchen. She and Kim Clemente make a great team. Just sad to see Cindy to leaving us, but obviously other opportunities for her, and so I just want to wish her nothing but the best. And then Ken Hopkins, who is relatively new to Marshwood, but he will be retiring at the end of the year as well. He's a special education teacher at Marshall Great Works School. And then Bonnie Dolph has resigned at the end of the year, and Bonnie is one of our food service workers at the Marshwood Middle School. So Bonnie has been a long-time employee of us as well, so Miss Bonnie. Next, this kind of goes under those categories that things I'm really trying to do in order, we talk about transparency a lot, and so sometimes there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people just don't know about, and then people ask questions like, oh, I wish I would have known about that. That's really great. And so one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on this year, and the last 2 years really, is talking about student attendance. We know we need to get kids to school in order for them to learn. Like that's just a simple math problem. And we also understand that coming out of a COVID situation, we were giving the message to families, look, if they have a sniffle, don't come to school, and now we're saying we want you back in school every day. And so there is a transition that has to take place here. And so there was a state grant, and Heidi's been instrumental in this, and she is going to share with us a little bit about the Count Me In program and allow her to talk about it. So Heidi, I'll turn this over to you.
Channel David and use the microphone so that everyone can hear. So this will be quick. John just asked me to give you a little overview about our work with Count Me In. We actually started working with Count Me In prior to COVID. I believe they're a nonprofit. They typically are grant funded in a variety of ways. They were at one point getting some support from the DOE. I'm not sure if they still are, but they're pretty tightly connected. Let's see if I can make this work. So Count Me In has a mission to basically get kids in school. It's a fundamental belief that if kids aren't in school, they can't benefit from the things we're trying to do. Academically, social, emotionally, physically, any of that. The most important thing is that they're in school. So working with them it really changed the way I thought about attendance coming out of the classroom. I feel like for years I was very focused on whether it was an excused absence or an unexcused absence. Nope, they don't care. If the kid's not in school, they can't learn. It's like really simple. And the other thing that they've done is really kind of reframe the problem for us, that we have to, there's ways to hold kids accountable that are very positive and welcoming and inviting, and that should be our goal, is to build relationships, and that strong, positive relationships starting at the youngest levels is our most significant lever to move the needle on attendance. So that's all well and good, and then we have a pandemic. So like John said, we have seen some pretty significant changes to our data. And it is important that we track this data. This is one of our accountability measures at the state and federal level. So when they do those dashboards or school report cards or whatever you want to call them, attendance is one of the things that they're looking at to see our kids, what percentage of your students are what they call chronically absent. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But we've made this partnership with Count Me In. They're currently working under a grant from the United Way, and we partnered with them on that. So what that means is we get a coach. This woman, Jess Anderson, is kind of a one-woman show, and she's been fantastic as a resource. She really, she's come down and worked with our administrative team a couple of times. She's worked with groups of teachers. She's willing to provide free professional development, just be a thought partner, like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Just really kind of throwing out ideas for how we can help improve attendance at all levels. Prior to COVID, the grant that Count Me In had was really focused on the elementary level. Their new grant is K-12, so that's really opened it up. So we've been working with her as a whole team, which has been awesome. So their model's really simple. Engagement's the most important thing. So the first thing they say is get on the phone. If a kid's absent for more than 2 days, just make a phone call. We miss you. We miss seeing your face. Is there anything we can do to help? Like just that kind of a mind frame. Building a relationship with kids and with families. And maintaining an intervention team, that's really important. So this is directly connected to the MTSS work that we've been doing in all our buildings, right? So when we talk about multi-tiered systems of support, one of the main things we're looking at right out of the gate is attendance. If the kid's not coming to school, what can we do? How can we intervene? What kind of wraparound support can we provide to ensure that their attendance improves? Looking at data. That's another thing that Count Me In's been really great at. She created a couple of data templates where we can just pull a report from Infinite Campus, drop it into a spreadsheet, and it automatically creates some nice visuals for us. So we can look at where kids are at and where each of our schools is in terms of student attendance. And then, like I said before, based on that data, implement some interventions, some research-based interventions, which she's really good at sharing with us. Collaborate with our community partners. That may be a social worker, that may be reaching out to family members. It could be almost anything. And it's just kind of cyclical, just keeping track of where kids are and staying on top of it. It gets away from you quickly. Yeah.
Does this factor tardiness too, or is it complete absences?
We haven't dug into tardiness.
Okay.
That is something you can get into, and she
Mm-hmm.
does have, I think a lot of the principles are the same, right?
Okay.
In terms of like that welcoming environment, be a place where kids want to go.
Mm-hmm.
When they walk in the door, I'm so glad to see you.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if you're 20 minutes late, I'm so glad to see you,
Yep. Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So, as I mentioned, chronic absenteeism is one of our metrics that we're held to by state and federal measurement in terms of sort of how do we tell if our schools are effective. And so chronic absenteeism is defined as any student who misses more than 10% of their scheduled school year. So we go to school 175 days, so any kid that's absent 18 days or more would be considered chronically absent. So what I do to keep track of that is every couple months I'll run a report. Let's say we've been in school for 100 days. I'll run a report. Show me every kid that's missed more than 10 days. So we can just kind of stay on top of it.
We also have a threshold where we have, I believe it's 6 data points or dates where we send out letters to families saying, at this point in time, you are in non-compliance and are
Yep.
tardy, and that's that 10% threshold that we use. So if we're 20 days into school, if they've missed more than 2 days, that would be at that threshold.
So whether it's excused or unexcused,
Doesn't-
Heidi?
Correct.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. So I put this data point in here because I think it's really important for comparison. So in the last school year, the 21-22 school year, 1 out of every 4 Maine students was chronically absent, 25%. Prior to COVID, we were hovering right around 10%.
Do we know where we landed in terms of that statistic?
Not last year.
Yeah.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I have current data for this year that
Okay.
I'm going to share with you.
Okay.
So these are the big ideas, and I know that I don't need to tell you guys this, but I think this is a good graphic. One of the things that's really significant, I think, in the attendance work is it starts with pre-K. It starts with building attendance mindsets and routines where families develop a sense very early on that kids being in school is important. And in the early grades, students who are chronically absent are less likely to read on grade level. They're not there, they aren't exposed to the content, so they get behind. Middle school students who are not proficient readers are 4 times as likely to drop out of school. High school students who are chronically absent are 7 times more likely to drop out. And students who drop out of high school live on average 9 years less than people who graduate. So, you can follow the chain and see how students who are chronically absent in first grade, it could have a long-term impact on their whole school career and ultimately on their life. So I think that's interesting. So this is our current data. Right around the middle of February, right before break, Jessica came down and worked with us. She sent me a template. I worked with Crystal. We pulled reports for each of our schools, and we looked at after 100 days of school, what percentage of our kids were chronically absent. So you can see that it ranges between 20 and 32% are currently chronically absent. So if you average that out, we're right on the state average right now of right about 25%. So I think we look a lot like everybody else right now.
Yeah.
And we're, yeah.
Remember what that means is that, so while that data we're saying is that, 31% of the students at Elliott Elementary School have been absent 10 days or more. So, that could be though, you have COVID, you
Yeah,
have
those
COVID
5.
twice,
Right.
you have the flu, we have an opportunity to go to Florida. So the reason why isn't the story anymore.
Right.
It's
No.
just you're not in school, you're not in school.
Right.
So just to understand what the data is saying.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is a mid-year check, it's not an end-of-the-year check, right? So we
Right.
had just gone through a period of a lot of illness
Yep.
in our buildings.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're still in a place where we're being pretty careful about that, which is probably a good thing.
Yes.
It'd be
But it does
interesting to
bring-
see the 2018 data, 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
I can go back and pull it,
Just curious.
it's not, it doesn't look like this.
Yeah.
No.
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 When we were doing this work prior to COVID, we were near that 10% chronically absent mark on either side of it, depending on what school we were looking at. The high school was a little higher than that. And when Jess saw our number of 20% at the high school, she wanted to know what magic dust we had, because that was one of the best high school numbers she's seen in the state. Mr. Hoopter, he's got it figured out.
There you go. That's right.
Well, I wonder too, like at Great Works, what makes them so much lower?
Well, again, right, so this is the questions we're starting to ask.
Yeah.
This was our first time of kind of really collectively as a group looking at our mid-year data. And I think that's a good question, like what's Jerry doing in his school that maybe we could use in other buildings? How, is there something they're doing? We put some things in place, which I'll talk about, but how are they being implemented, and are there more effective, more successful stories we can learn from?
Well, I wonder too with like at the middle school, they're still young kids, but they're getting up very early. Like I know like from personal household this year, Anders he's had COVID twice and the flu. 3 weeks out and exhausted. Great Works, they get to sleep in, right, more. And then the little kids are just younger, so they're germier. So, like I can look at that and feasibly understand why those numbers look like that, but it's still like Great Works is much lower.
I think you've got a lot of things going on. You've got a cultural shift of the messaging that we as a district have. You have a cultural shift in how people look at absences. You also have this idea around how people look at school, and school it sometimes can be a variable for things. And then also like how do we create an environment where kids want to be? And so you try to tackle all these 4 or 5 different stressors to be able to come up with that succinct message. And so like the example I always use is how you just said is that we have a student at Marshall High School. I don't want them coming in and get a pink slip saying, shame on you, you're absent, bring me a note and you're gonna have detention.
Right.
I'd rather have it be, welcome, we're happy to have you
Yes.
here, it's great to see you.
It's a
Those
different
are just
culture.
different approaches.
I think that there's opportunities at the school level to really dig into some of these numbers a little bit. I mean, I would be curious, how many of these students were planned family vacation outside of vacation week, right? I don't know the answer. I know it's happening. I don't know the answer. Like, that would be interesting to look at, right?
But why
Peter?
the increase? If it used to be 10%.
Why is it 30?
Right. So is there a mentality shift that it doesn't matter and you can take vacation, or what? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Right.
The economy must be great, so they can take
Yeah.
vacation.
Yeah.
The other part is, don't forget, remote education at the elementary school for a little while was, here's a packet.
Right.
And so if I want to go, when I can go to Disney World in November when it's considerably cheaper, if I can just get the work and I'm still making up the work, what's the harm?
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of a mindset piece there. The other part that, like, for instance, that Peter was struggling with a little bit is that he had a cluster of kids. There wasn't a lot, 4 or 5, I'm not sure the number today what it is, where they would go to White Pine. And so
that's
there's,
true.
there's an
Yeah,
educational
yeah.
program, but they're still not in school, you know, even though there's so that
Right.
is also a piece of the data here. So like, it's just, you know, there's
Yeah,
just,
that's
Yeah, that's one day a week.
you know, so.
Yeah.
Oh,
20%.
really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
So so it's just these things that you don't think about,
Yeah, but-
sometimes they kind of come up.
It's worth it to make me do.
So I'm sure you guys have heard most of these things, but these are some things that we're trying to do to address the issue. Regular ongoing communication, that's really been a stressor. That's like the number one recommended intervention is getting on the phone. How are you? What can we do to help? We noticed you're missing. We can't wait to see you again. From the teacher, that teacher contact, that teacher reaching out. We also put some attendance champions in place to help support that work, to really keep their eye on the attendance numbers, to make some of those initial phone calls, to connect a family, say, with the nurse or with the principal or with a teacher if they needed that support. Looking at our data, that's something John and I have really been focused on this year, is making sure that we're continually looking at student data, having conversations about it, supporting that work in all of our buildings. Prioritizing strong relationships and connections. Making school a place where kids want to be is the number one thing that we can do. I mean, kids are not absent when it's like a special day or there's a special event, or, you know, the older they get, they go for different reasons. Maybe it's to see their friends or socialize in some way if it's not to go to their favorite class. But just building those connections among their peers and with the adults is super important. We've been working with Jess. Jerry just let me know the end of last week that he had called her and she was coming down to consult on a tricky case that they had and just help them brainstorm. I mentioned the champions and then, the reframing. I think that's important as well. So that's what we've kind of been doing so far, and that's really all I have. I just kind of wanted to let you know where we're at and that we're doing this work and really trying to maintain that balance in our heads. Like, we want you here, but we also get it. If you're sick, stay home. Like,
It's
it's a dance.
For me, this it's a simple concept for us too. As leaders, what do? Is that we have, the first of the month we always talk about special education. The second meeting of our month we talk about MTSS. We talk about attendance, and so this is an ongoing narrative that we have with our leadership teams. Just again, like if what we value is reflected in how we use time, we want to make sure that we're taking the time to talk about this. Because we can't teach kids if they're not here.
Yep.
And that's the big concept right now. Attendance champions. Call if someone's absent for a day. What can we do? We miss you today. What can we do to help you? Are there any supports that you need? Be able to reach out. Also coordinate with the principal to say, look, this child's been absent 6 times. Want to keep this on your radar? Here you go. Also coordinate with the nurse. What we don't want to do is have 15 people calling a parent, but we try to create a rotational schedule where there's supports in place. If someone's been out more than one day, then it might be the nurse that calls to say, look, are you feeling okay? What supports can we give you? Maybe if it goes to 2 or 3 days, the principal may call and say, hey, where are you? We also have our attendance policies where we send on those ongoing letters. We also have, then we get into the truancy, which is kind of a little bit different. This is where this got confused. Count me in made things very simple. You're either in school or you're not. Whereas the truancy laws kind of go into the excused versus unexcused absences, and that's where things get a little bit hazy. And this is really saying you got to be in school over. So, any questions for anybody?
That's good. Thank you, Heidi.
Okay.
Thank you, Heidi.
Next on the agenda is just kind of our second bite of the apple, so to speak, around our calendar for next year. And so some slight changes. As we met with the SRTC, there were a couple days that were off. We had a very productive meeting with the state of Maine, and so I also got some really good feedback, I thought, from the QEA, which was really nice to hear. And so their real ask was that could we move a professional development day to March? They felt like our professional development was so front-loaded at the beginning of the year. Basically, by November, we were done for the year. And so there was a day, which is March 8th, where a number of SRTC schools are already taking a professional development day. So if we move that to a professional development day, that really doesn't create any conflicts in the calendar. And then the other day that there would be a change is that the SRTC schools really advocated for the 22nd of December being a school day. And so the original calendar that I had shared with you was kind of up in the air about the 22nd, that Friday before that winter break. So that is going to be a relatively short break in comparison to where it typically is. It's going to be just over a week. And then this is a little something different, and it was the way to make things work for things to still make sense. Is that right now our last day of school is on the 7th, which is graduation. That happened, the voting day, which is going to be November 7th, is going to be a day off.
Yep.
And so that doesn't count as one of the 181 teacher days or 175 school days. So there'll be a day off in the middle. That pushes us, our graduation, so that we end school on the day of graduation. And we also are allowed to have the March 8th professional development day. So
Yep.
that's a little bit of a shift. So currently, that was a teacher workshop day, and so we're going to move that teacher workshop day to the 8th. And that was really at the request of the QEA. I was surprised that they asked that. I thought, that was a fair request. If it makes sense, I think Heidi was as thrilled as anybody to have an opportunity to do some professional development in March. So that's really kind of in a nutshell where we are right now. I did get some questions from the QEA, and I just think it's always good to go over this. Like, where do the 5 days come from, and how do we negotiate those? And so it really comes down to two factors. The first factor is that each district, all 8 districts, have individual labor contracts. Some labor contracts say there are specific days that they must give off, and I may get the community wrong. It may have been York has the Friday before it was traditionally considered April vacation as a mandatory day off. That's negotiated in the agreement. So when you talk about the 5 days off, that's one day right off the bat that's gone because that's in an agreement. Currently, Noble's labor contract says that they can't start school before Labor Day, and so that's 3 days or 2 days right off the bat. And so before we even get rolling, then you start adding these other days in really quickly, and then you can quickly see how 5 days, and it's not 5 days for us, it's 5 days amongst all 8 schools. And so that's where that gets a little bit tricky. And so it's not like we can go in and advocate, like there's some non-negotiables. One of the things that was really good to hear is that if a school agrees to send their children on the day when they are not in session, but SRTC is in session, that doesn't hurt us. The problem is that all 8 schools have to agree to do that. So if you have a district that says we are not sending kids, period, prior to Labor Day, then that impacts all of the other 7 schools. So that really is a big issue that we have to address. The other thing to keep in mind is that, and again, I may get these numbers wrong, but I believe Kennebunk has 178 student days. York, I think, has 179 or 180 student days. We have 175, so that's also a variable. So we focus on the 175 student days, and the extra days on the sides is a different conversation, but it's also a factor as you kind of look at what the schedule looks like. Anything that jumps out at you quickly with this?
What do you mean when neighboring towns have different amount of school days?
So, we have 175 student days, but York has negotiated that they send their students 178 days, so they send 3 more days than we do. Maine has a minimum, but you have to do 175. So these are some of those things that are kind of like, it's just different. The other thing that comes up, it indirectly relates to your question, is that when people talk about this idea that we want to change the start time for all high schools to 8:30, no one's going to disagree that they would love to have high school students stay later or sleep in later. I think that would be great in a lot of ways. The problem is that school days in the state of Maine can be as short as 6 hours, or they can be as long as 7 hours. So our school day is 7 hours long, whereas I think and this was a couple of years ago, but I think Bedford was like a 6 hours and 15 minutes. And so for them to manipulate that calendar is a little bit different than us with the 7-hour school day. And so there's some kind of interesting factors as you start comparing different contracts between different districts that are very interesting. The number of school days and how long the school day is are really 2 things that don't necessarily get talked about a lot, but are really things you have to consider.
Like, so would that, the length of the school year and things like that, it has to do with the teacher contracts? Or, like, so say if we get mandated to, send our students, our upper level students at 8:30 or whatever, then can we revisit contracts as a board and also revisit?
Well, there is you would have to open the contract and negotiations with the union to be able to do that. And so that would be one of the challenges that you would have is like, what are the variables that you want to control? And so a few years ago, it used to be, you would have concerns about hiring more bus drivers because we'd have to run a couple of runs at the same time. And so like that really isn't, because it used to be we'd have to buy more buses, we'd have to get more bus drivers, and can we do that? And so like now, that's a much different conversation because there isn't bus drivers to get. Right now, the teacher day is 7.5 hours, in the building. There's also professional responsibilities that come outside of that. But how do you manipulate that if there were to be a change? So if we started at 8:30 and we have a 7-hour school day for our students here, that means students are getting out at 3:30 in the afternoon. What are the implications of that? If we want to start at 8:30 in the morning with a bus situation, do we want kids standing on Emery's Bridge Road at 6:20 in the morning if they're 7 years old? And I don't know necessarily. Those are questions that we had to value before. So those brings things up that just are variables that people don't necessarily think about when they have these conversations, but they're all factors that we have to consider. So certainly we could offer, or we could ask to open the contract. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but they would have the option.
Mr. Caverly, what about the effect on sports starting at 8:30? I know for like sometimes practices start at 3:15.
Yeah, so that would be really. So there would be, in my mind, some sports that would be really drastically impacted. I think baseball and softball, in particular, would be because if you figure you get out of school at 3:30, and again now it comes to a philosophical thing. Do you want to have kids getting out of school an hour early in order for athletics? That doesn't necessarily. That seems like the tail's wagging the dog a little bit to me. And so if you were to do that, one of the issues that we ran into in the past was that geographically we're about an hour away from the majority of our opponents. And so if you wanted to get out at 3:30, we wouldn't be able to start games till 5 or 5:15. How do you get in, in beginning of April, middle of April, how do you get in a baseball game or a softball game that typically is 2.5 to 3 hours? It's going to be dark at that time. Also in the fall during daylight savings times, if you don't have lights, and so your freshmen, first team opportunities get impacted by that, it may also force you to do more night games, which the tricky part, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, I think it's just you have to figure it out, but there's only 24 hours in a day. Right, and as I said to you before, like when we had this conversation as a board, and I was working under Dr. Nash at the time, Thornton Academy's answer was that they literally had basketball practices go until 10:30 at night. That was, and so all you've done is you've just pushed everything back. I mean, it's not like you haven't created more time within the day. No. And so it's a really tough situation because every community is a little bit different. So those are all factors that we would have to. Winter wouldn't necessarily be impacted, but you now would have kids coming home later. You would have more night games. There's other impacts that you just have to. Again, you have to have a value system to look at. Ski team alone. I mean, how do you get to to practice when it's a 2-hour ride or an hour and 45-minute ride and you can't leave till 3:30? Right now they're leaving at like literally 2:15. You're on the bus. You're going. So, and again, it's just you have to have those kind of conversations. And there's some things that we could do, but like again, when you look at the master schedule and you look at kind of the daily schedule, there's just some variables that things you can control, things you can't control. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions about this? The other thing is that there is some collaborative planning time that's built in to the schedule, and I did receive some feedback from the middle school regarding conferences, and I know that we talked about this in one of the board meetings, but there was some feedback from staff in particular and also some families that they, because of scheduling restrictions, they were not able to get a conference in the fall. If you do the math out, if you have, 3.5 hours, over a couple of days, you've got basically 7 hours of conferences. If you do 10 minutes per conference, that's 70 conferences. If you have a team that has 85 students on it, there's a potential that you're betting that 15 out of the 70 or 15 out of the 85 wouldn't be there. Yep. And so it's something that we may need to look at as we talk about kind of the conferences schedules and those types of things. So at the same time, I was thrilled to see what the high school did. They got a little creative, and I thought it was awesome that we had a wonderful orientation night last week, and so I thought it was great thinking on the part of Brad and the staff that we, typically spring conferences for parents at the high school is not a big seller. That's just no other way to say it, and so created an opportunity that staff wanted to take an hour, Brett, to come down and kind of be part of the orientation where we had parents and students walking around the gym, kind of doing an opportunity to kind of get the feel for the school. That was able to be done. So we were trying to find a way to build those positive relationships early. So my plan would be that I would take this back to the QEA to give them kind of one little look at this. I would begin to kind of dive into a little bit on the conferences, those types of things. I want to get those dates cemented, and then we would go from there. Does that make
Yep.
sense to everybody?
This will be up for a vote in,
I'd like to try to do it the first meeting in April, so
Okay.
in 3 weeks. Okay. So, just under the other kind of category, then I'll go to the student report. Questions about snow days and those types of things. And so, currently, we have used 5 snow days. We do not build in 5 snow days in our calendar. So if you look at the calendar, there's 175 student days. And so we add days for every day that we add beyond that, where some districts add 180 and then take away days. We just add on to the end of the calendar. And so right now, with no more snow, which I hope we don't have any more, the last day of school would be Friday, June 16th. And so that would be our hope going forward. I don't want to say never, but I'm going to say never. We're not going to change graduation. So like whether it goes to the 6th day, that we're not going to say all of a sudden, guess what, families, you're flying in from California, we're going to move graduation back 2 days, or make it 2 days earlier, 2 days later. We're just not doing that.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out as it comes. We'll get creative. So graduation does not change. And so just so everybody's aware of that, because I think some of those questions this time of year kind of periodically pop up. So we're not moving graduation, so graduation is still going to be, I think it's the 9th.
9th, yep.
Right now, one of the things that we always consider this time of year is kind of the last late start, early release Thursdays. And so right now, that potentially could be the 15th of June. That's always subject to change, and we'll see how those days kind of over the next month or so, once the weather kind of subsides, we'll kind of solidify when those last days would be for people. And then, my hope is that we're no more snow days and we can get out the 16th, and that would be the end of the conversation. And that's going to be a half day as well, so just a reason for that. Any questions about that?
looks good.
Cavalier, I heard a couple of seniors saying they wanted to come in Saturdays to make up their.
Yeah.
Right.
I never said that.
Perfect. I want to turn over for student reports.
Perfect. All right, so spring sports are going to be starting up very soon. Most tryouts start on the 27th. And boys volleyball beat Falmouth in their first home opener on March 7th. Student Gov is working on improving the culture in the weight room. There was some attention brought to that the music or just the all-around atmosphere in there was a little intimidating for some students to come in, so we're hoping to make that just as pleasant as any other classroom. Student Gov is also working on finding some new students to fill the executive board and finding a new student representative to take Annabelle's place. We miss you, though. And the senior class, it was brought to the attention at the Student Gov meeting that we have every Monday of the first month with all the kids from the advisories, that a lot of the seniors were frustrated with the AP testing being required this year and that requirement being announced after everyone signed up for their classes because of the cost for it. And it's just brought, like I said, the frustration was brought forward about it, and we're hoping to come to a kind of consensus or an idea to solve this problem so that next year's seniors or just students in general don't face the same issue of having to, if they sign up for 5 AP classes, that's $500 now that they are required to spend on testing. So that was something we're working on figuring out as well.
Yeah, and just additional to that, it was like maybe a fundraiser for next year to help pay for students who just can't afford it. That was a big part of that. But yeah. All right, for extracurriculars.
Just so that people know this, that there is monies available through the College Board if people have financial needs for the AP exam. So that's already available. So just so you know that. So I certainly talk to your school counselor if that's a concern.
Yep. On March 9th, there was an 8th grade parent night where all clubs and sports teams showed up and showed out. 8th graders and their guardians got to meet captains, leaders, and presidents of all different extracurriculars that Marshwood offers. The GSA is looking into a new gender-neutral restroom and also beginning to plan their June dance. Quiz Bowl states are March 25th at Bates College. The yearbook is due on April 10th, meaning students will get them before graduation this year, and that I don't think has been announced until now. So, woohoo! Deadlines, anyway. The theme of this month is Diversity and Culture Month. Advisories have all joined Google Slide, where a plethora of countries were available to be picked between. Once an advisory picked a country, they were tasked with finding different artists from the country and picking a song from one of those artists to add to a playlist. Additionally, there were other questions that they had to answer, like the amount of miles from South Berwick to their capital, different foods and traditions. The end goal is to, by the end of the month, flip through the entire slideshow and learn about countries that some kids may never have learned about past their name. So
Very cool.
that concludes our shorter report this evening.
So one thing I just did want to touch on is funny, Ron, that you mentioned this. I just have been so thrilled to see the number of young women taking the opportunity to be involved with the Wellness Center after school. That is a huge cultural shift. I just have always believed that hard work is one of the variables you can control, and to be able to see this afternoon upwards of 30 student athletes and they're working with adults, comfortable, feeling safe, feeling appreciated, and feeling good about themselves was just great to see, and that's a huge shift from where we were, I would say, 5 or 6 years ago. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just was in my brain a few minutes ago. So awesome. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. In correspondence, we've had nothing come in the past couple of weeks upon which to report, so we'll move into the report of the committees. Finance and Facilities met earlier this evening. I'll start by talking about the numbers, and then Rebecca and Heather will talk about facilities, transportation, et cetera. So the general fund cash balance at the end of February was a little lower than we wanted it to be, but that was because the state subsidy check was a day or two late. So once that came in, we're back up at a healthy balance. Revenues are still running a little bit behind budget, but that's expected to catch up over the next couple of months. Adult education is still in the black, and as it always does, working that glide path down towards finishing off right around zero. Food service is still showing losses, but that's expected to move into profitability by year end. And the federal grants are still very slow coming in. We're at 32.5% remaining on the budget based, on the general fund financial statement. We should be at 33.3, so it's a little bit lower, but again, forecasting the expenses for the balance of the year, it looks like we'll catch up on that, so that should be good. That is all I had on the numbers.
Okay. I'd like to just give a facility update. The water at the middle school, they test for bacteria daily, and that has been passing that test. And they also monthly test for the lead and the PFAS. And there's also been some concern over the taste of the water at the middle school. And so they're looking into exploring that and seeing what our options are for that. As far as transportation goes, we are happy to welcome a new bus driver,
Hey.
Donald LeBlanc. He is a new full-time driver who will have a loop. So closing the gap on needed bus drivers. So excited about that.
Okay, and if there's anyone out there listening tonight, if you're interested in driving, there's lots of open availability for part-time bus drivers, full-time bus drivers. It's a great gig. Food service update. Leadership has been meeting with food service managers in the various buildings, just working on a communication pathway and in working on improvements and things like that. In terms of energy efficiency and recycling initiatives, the leadership has looked into options for us to start recycling all of our goods. That's something currently we're not doing, unfortunately. It is a very costly venture, but it's something that the board feels very important that we need to invest in. And one of the vendors that was researched is Casella. We're looking into a zero sorts recycling option, which would be just a slight increase into what we're paying now for disposing of our trash. It's about a $10,000 increase for that option. So more information to come as we work out the budget for the next fiscal year. And the lighting project is all on schedule. ready to go. We're really excited about that because that will, help us save some money and save us some energy as well. That's it.
Thank you. Ed policy will next meet on the 22nd of March, right? Yes, okay. And again, wellness and SEL will meet again on April 5th, so we'll get updates from Ed policy at our next meeting and wellness after their meeting. That concludes the report of the committees and brings us into the new business. We have a bunch of second reads from our last meeting, so why don't we move right into those? May I have a motion, please, with regard to JICA? And
I move
hey,
to,
can I, before we go, I'm just noticing because this came up last meeting, for these second readings, this should say second reading and approval, right? Not discussion?
That's correct.
Yeah. Adoption. Okay, so for each of these first four, if those of you who make the motion would use the word adoption rather than discussion?
okay.
Thank you.
I move to approve the second reading and adoption of policy JICA, student dress.
Second, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, no changes from last meeting? I did catch up with the idea that this policy actually has both the currently in effect policy and the policy that would go into effect for the 2023-2024 school year. So at some point early in that school year, we'll just drop the existing part, or?
Yeah, so the plan is that we want to be able to give families an opportunity to understand that there are changes coming. And
Yep.
so as they kind of prepare for the next school year, and so the
Right.
new policy would take place at the beginning of the next school year.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you. May I have a motion, please, with regard to JEAA?
I'll move that we approve the second reading and adoption of policy JEAA, school attendance, student absences, and tardiness.
I'll second, Lisa.
Lisa? Thank you. Any comments or questions? Again, no changes since last time.
Can I just make one comment?
Please.
Is that, please understand that this will this will be coming around again. There's some ELO work that we have been talking about that may be coming forward, as well as potential state changes, as well as recommendations regarding increasing the graduation requirements from what they currently are. So.
Right, okay, good. Anything else? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you. Motion, please, with regard to IKF.
I move to approve the second reading and adoption of policy IKF, graduation requirements.
I second, Rebecca.
Rebecca? Okay, no changes since last time? Comments or questions? All in favor? Thank you, Kate. That's 6-0. Thank you very much. Motion, please, with regard to JLA.
Go ahead. I move to approve the second reading and adoption of policy JLA, student accident and athletic insurance.
A second.
Kate, thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you. And please, a motion with regard to JLA-E1, which is now apparently properly labeled.
I move that we approve the second reading and adoption of policy JLA-E1, student accident and athletic insurance form.
Second, Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you. Comments or questions? No changes? All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you very much. Motion, please, with regard to JJIA.
I'll JJIA, current code is JJJ-JIC, eligibility for participation in extracurricular and interscholastic activities at MSAD 35 schools.
Second, Heather?
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Kate. Again, no changes. Questions, comments? All in favor? 6-0, thank you. And may I have a motion, please, with regard to the aforementioned JJJ-JIC?
I move to rescind policy code JJJ/JIC.
Second, Rebecca?
Rebecca, thank you. And of course, this is because we've just put the other one in place. Comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you very much. And that's it on the second reads. May I have a motion, please, with regard to this Elliott Community Service Department request?
I move we approve the request from Elliott Community Service Department, Elliott Kids Play and Elliott Youth Bound Summer 2023 to use MSAD 35 bus transportation for their summer program activities June 27th, 2023 to August 17th, 2023.
I'll second, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm so happy to see this.
I know, it's
Yes.
just.
Yes.
So great.
Feels like we're getting back to normal.
And again, this is a revenue opportunity as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and also
Yes.
is great for our, obviously, for the kids, right, that's the big idea, right? But at the same time, there's a revenue opportunity, and also, I would probably say, one of the most important things is it also allows us to employ bus drivers over the summertime,
Yes.
and so that
Yeah.
keeps people on staff. And
Yes.
so I think this is a great opportunity, this is a win-win-win for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I'd love to see more of this.
Do you know if the transportation was built into the budget for this as well for them? Because I know last year,
Yeah, it usually is.
well,
It
but last year it
wasn't
wasn't.
it wasn't
And so
last
all
year.
of the parents had to pay out of pocket for their kids
Oh, wow.
to go on trips.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Are you talking about the LA Community Service Department?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leadership,
I don't know.
A leadership issue.
probably.
I
Okay,
don't know.
just wondering.
Because I know for South Berwick Rec, they built it into their,
Yeah.
It normally is. That was the
It
first
didn't
year
get
I've
built
seen
in
that.
last
I don't know what
year,
happened.
and-
It was a line item something.
Yeah.
else.
I know, yes.
Okay, any other comments or
This is
questions?
great.
All in favor? Great, thank you,
And
6-0.
honestly, we just drive the bus. How's
Yeah.
that, right?
Yep, I don't know, I just drive the bus. May I have a motion, please, with regard to the one-act play?
I move to approve the request for overnight in Waterville for the MHS one-act play for state finals on March 24th at Lawrence High School.
Second, Rebecca?
Rebecca, thank you. This sounds like a cool thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Any comments or questions? I hope they win.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Cool.
That's awesome.
I'm assuming there was some sort of competition beforehand to get to the finals? Is that, anybody know that? How that
I
works?
think it's typically with the one act, it's like a state festival.
Oh,
where
okay.
everybody
Okay.
Yeah,
goes, yes.
gotcha.
Yeah, it's a,
That makes
They're
sense.
moving on from their regional competition.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And there are 9 regions across the state that all come together for the state festival.
Cool.
We are moving on to one of those now.
That's great.
Awesome.
fun.
Congratulations to them. All in favor? Okay, that's good. And the last piece of new business is with regard to an overnight trip for Hold.
I move to approve an overnight trip for Hold from Friday, May 12th to Sunday, May 14th to attend Teens to Trails event at Adventure Bound in Caratuck, Maine for 10 students and 1 chaperone.
That's awesome.
Second, Jen?
Jen, okay, thank
Can
you.
I just add an interesting point to this? Obviously, this is great that Hold's doing this.
Yes.
But at the same time, there has been some changes in state law, and I think it's had some unintended consequences, but in order for a school to take trips now, they have to have a registered Maine guide leading them. And so that's a huge shift. So it used to be that if you wanted to just take a group, and if Mr. Pash wanted to go do this, he could go do it, but now there was a law that was enacted that has kind of created this trickle-down effect where it's impacted schools tremendously. We're fine because this is through a program.
Change the Trails
Yeah,
provides
yeah,
main
that's
guides,
fine.
yeah.
And we also, Renee Doucette is a registered
Yeah,
Maine
that's what I
guide
was
for
gonna
us,
say.
you know, so we're okay, but I just think it's just one of those things that may come up in the future. Just understand that there was some laws enacted that have made some small changes. We're in good shape, obviously, Renee is, in South Wisconsin, so.
Yeah.
Are they going to raft on this trip, do you know?
That is typically, I don't know, the typically
So
is the rafting.
I looked up
It's not-
Caratunk, it's on the Kennebec River.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
just
cool.
below
It's
the
typically,
forks,
yeah.
so, yeah, good, excellent. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? That is 6-0, thank you. That concludes our new business. Brings us to the building administrator check-in. We have the upper grades this evening.
Well, thank you. Just a couple quick shout-outs. I don't know if you knew this, but every sport now has a sportsmanship award that they have. It used to be just for basketball, or it used to be for this sport or that sport, but now it's all sports. And those are voted on by opposing coaches. So if somebody wins the cross-country sportsmanship award at a school, it's because the coaches that we compete against voted for that school before it was awarded. It's not uncommon for 130 schools across the state for somebody to win this award each year, or maybe they win 2. Marshwood, after 2 seasons, is at 5.
Wow.
5, and that to me is unheard of. I've never heard of a school winning 5 in a year, let alone the year's not even over. So credit to the kids, credit to the coaches, credit to Mr. Buzzell for his leadership, because that to me is just as valuable as winning a state championship or a gold ball or whatever. So very proud of the work that they're doing with our athletic programs. Also, I know I mentioned this before, Annabelle and I are going to lunch April 1st, no fooling.
Yep.
And hopefully she will be one of the drawing winners for the $1,000 scholarship. They give away 10, but that is up in Bangor at Jeff's Catering. So we have lunch. She gets her award with all the other high school representatives there. There's usually over 100, and we're hopeful that she can win one this year. So if you weren't here when I said it last time, you're here today. Congratulations.
Yay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
As always, thanks for the opportunity to share a few things from our experiences at the middle school. I want to ride on Brett's coattails for a second and talk a little bit about Bobby Pratt is a math teacher at the middle school, as you know, and he's the head basketball coach for the boys. And I watched him last year, and I watched him again this year. 2 great runs to the championship. They didn't make it to the States, but I probably spend more time watching Bobby Pratt than I do watching the game. And I've got to tell you, he is a class act. He is great with the kids. He's calm. He's a great role model, and we're really proud of him. So congratulations to that team and to Bobby Pratt. Yeah, we've been talking a lot this school year about the work that the middle school and the high school have been doing to create opportunities for staff members to talk about what's happening in each school and how to coordinate their efforts, and whether it's the transition for 9th graders when 8th graders go up, or if it's what's being taught in various classes so we can help ensure that students are successful. Those conversations are going on, and I think there's been a lot of positive results, but I'm also very proud of the fact that Jerry Burnell and I have been talking about the need for that to happen with 5th and 6th grade teachers. So we've worked it out so that we're going to finish this school year, and Jerry and I wanted to do this last year, but we weren't able to pull it off this year for some reason. But our 5th grade, Jerry's 5th grade teachers are coming to the middle school tomorrow during our late start professional development. And they're going to engage in conversations about how they help us select the different teams with the criteria we give them, and is that working? And I think they're going to talk a little bit about the 5th grade math and how is that affecting, and are the kids that are coming in at the 6th grade being successful. So those conversations, when they've never had before, have to start, and then we're hoping what's going to happen is they're going to start developing a relationship and create a bridge between the 2 schools, and Jerry and I are willing to create multiple times next school year for that to happen. So that's exciting for me, because when I went down with my school counselors and a few of the students and talked to the 5th graders, the excitement for them coming up to the 6th grade and the need for us to be as supportive in their transition as we are with 8th graders going to the high school was so obvious. And as you know, that was my first year as a middle school principal. So it was eye-opening for me. So Jerry and I are committed to that piece, and Brett and I are committed to the other end. So I just wanted you to know we've got, I think, great plans to support our teachers having conversations with different buildings. And then I'm going to end on a positive note, and this is a shout out to you, Ms. Holland, and the others who are doing this work. Last year, because of the pandemic and some of the challenges that we faced the first semester, it was really hard to predict what was going to happen at the end of the year with grade 8 students. There have been a lot of things that had happened traditionally in the past that have been lost for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, John. So how did we get back to some normalcy? And I thought we did some wonderful things last year, but the 8th grade parents never had an opportunity to come together and plan, because we didn't even know if they were going to be able to do something socially. Well, this year, Ms. Holland and some others have been wonderful in organizing fundraisers so that at the end of the year, for those of you who don't know, the middle school takes care of 2 events. So one is we take them to the Hilltop Fun Center for an entire day, and we do a cookout, and we come back, and there's an ice cream truck, and it's just a day to have fun with your classmates right around the second or last day of the school year, and it's a fun day. And then the second to last day of school, we have our recognition for the 8th graders in our gym. And the teachers, the 8th grade teachers put that together, and it's amazing the slideshow they do. But those are the 2 things that the middle school does, and the turnout last year by the parents and community was unbelievable for that 8th grade celebration. Well, Heather and her group have been having ice cream socials on Fridays in the middle school. We've had 3. I think it's 600 and change each time that they come in. Tonight was the spaghetti dinner at the school, so I got goosebumps right now. So I've always believed that we've started to drift away from having parents come into schools and find ways to support what's happening after elementary school. So I remember my wife was at everything when my daughters were in elementary school. And then it seemed like as they went to middle school and high school, that kind of subsided. So I love the fact that we're finding a way for the parents in the community to do something to support our students in grade 8. And just a shout out to your group, you're doing a wonderful job.
Yep.
We'll keep supporting those things. I haven't had one float yet, but I see a lot of jacked up kids leaving our caf, going into a classroom, but anyways, jacked up, I just mean hopped up on sugar, I apologize.
No.
That's a bad choice
No,
but
it's fine.
just thank you for that, and I think it's been a rewarding experience, and not only are the kids at our school benefiting from the social, but we're now gonna be able to have a grade 8 social that's a parent-driven event to top off the other 2 things we do, so thank you.
It's great.
Thank you.
What Nolan's been talking about. Ice cream social?
Oh, they love it.
Yeah.
Yay, Heather.
And
We don't
it's
talk
cute,
about those
too,
things.
because
Those are violations of
yeah.
nutrition, so we don't
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
it.
yeah. Let's not talk about it.
We don't talk about it. You kind of cough over those things.
it's good modeling for the other parents who
Right.
really haven't had an example of what are the traditional
Right.
Yeah.
middle school things that
Yeah.
got lost sort of with the pandemic, so it's nice for them to see.
I have a binder that I'm
Good.
passing on to the next grade.
Very good.
John, I think it's diet soda and sugar-free ice cream.
Yeah, I think so, I think so,
That's it.
yeah.
It could be lactate ice cream.
Yeah, there we go.
I will say, it was fascinating talking to Renee because she said the things that kids are interested in now is very, very different than it was 4 years ago. It just like, the whole, like the photo booth was a huge thing, a few weeks ago, but that wasn't even a thought, It's just fascinating how
Yeah.
trends change and kind of, this is kids' first experience, so they're kind of reinventing what that experience looks like. It's just fascinating. I
Yep.
just thought it was really
Yeah.
kind of neat. So, yep.
Okay, any last thoughts or comments from the board?
I just have a couple.
Please.
I just wanted to, again, reiterate, the 8th grade transition night was so fantastic. And it just hit upon all those things we talked about, people being back in. It was really well attended. It was great. I'm a parent of an 8th grader. I heard great feedback. It was fantastic and well done, and the kids were engaged. It was great. Also, I think I told you guys the Mattering board at the middle school. I was there for a fundraiser, and of course, I'm there for a fundraiser, embarrassing my son because I'm like crying at the when you walk into the cafeteria on both sides. There's a big display with a bunch of sticky notes, and if you have a minute to pop in or you want a good cry, go ahead. And I was really surprised to see, the things that we think matter. It was really eye-opening to read. A lot of those things, yes, are there, but then other little, things that you might think are inconsequential and that were just really heartwarming, or things that you don't necessarily think that kids are affected by in our communities were up there, and it was just really so go see it if you have a minute. It was
What
lovely.
stood out, Jen?
What's
What stood out?
I actually snapped a couple pictures, and I should. just, a lot of things like when a teacher notices that I'm absent was on there a couple times. When people notice that I'm not there,
Yeah.
not only do they greet me, but when they notice that I'm not there, when they ask, or when they remember, when I tell them something and then they remember something, like they check in when they knew you were going away or something. When I have enough to eat, when teachers ask me if I have enough to eat. So, yeah.
So Gina Brodsky came into our administrators meeting on Monday and kind of gave us a breakdown of just kind of like what the comments were, and then how do we bring this to the, Jerry raised his hand very quickly to say, look, I want to be a part of this at the Great Work School. How do we do this? Gina reached out to Kelly Glenn and right on the way out, how do we do it a couple classes at the high school? But it was amazing, just the simple of, hi, how are you? Good morning.
Yes.
That was, I think, one of the most prevalent responses, and then just how was your day?
Yes.
And just those little, just making connections and eye contact, and just the little things. And on the other hand, there's the stuff that makes you go, like you just want to make
Yes.
sure that you're always supporting kids, and it was good. So,
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And then a reminder, the students might have mentioned it, and I might have zoned out, so apologies. But Frozen, I think, is the first and second weekends of April coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
You okay? If you don't mind if I piggyback on what John said, so when we were talking about at the end of last year, how do we start working with the social emotional learning piece? One of the things we were trying to figure out would be one really simple thing that we could do as a staff that would make a huge difference. And so we've done this at other schools I've worked in, and so I could just remember at the very beginning of the year when I was having a faculty meeting, I would say, this is what I want you all to do. I want you all to be in the hallway during passing time. If you have to you finish the lab or whatever, that's fine, but I want you in the hallway. And I don't want you just in the hallway, but I want you engaged, talking to each other, and I want you connecting with kids.
Yep.
And all those things that John was just saying. Well, of course, is what I saw from half the group. Come on, Dave. Really? And so a few of the people that did that, and that's a natural reaction every now and then, because time is precious for teachers. I get it. We got to transition from there. So I paid attention. I read rooms and saw the people that were doing that. And then I've had 3 or 4 of them come up to me like a month later and say, holy cow, what a difference it's making in the culture of our building. Not only are they engaging with kids, but things like, good to see you, hey, how you feeling today, nice smile. And teachers are telling me they're engaging with students they don't even have in class. And the other great part is teachers are doing collegiality things with each other. And they're kidding around and laughing and smiling, and students are watching them model
Yep.
how they
Yeah.
should get along.
Yes.
One simple thing
Yep.
that 55 staff members were committed to do has made a huge difference with students. So when you talk about SEL and some of the things we could do, it's the little things we were taught. So by the way, I'm going to admit, I teared up the first time I read this. I had to walk away and come back. There's too many people around me. Powerful,
Yeah.
but just by virtue of the fact that they told me, by virtue of the fact that the school wanted them to start thinking about what makes me feel like I matter at school, what makes me feel like I matter at home, the fact that we were emphasizing on that was a huge piece to the students.
Yep.
That we cared about that. So it's a really powerful thing, but it's just a little thing.
Yeah.
And they bring it home. I have a middle schooler that is starting, he has been doing it for months actually. Like, how was your day? Or, oh, Mom, you went through this trouble of making this dinner. I really appreciate it. Like, I'm starting to hear a lot of that. Like, and sometimes I'm like, who are you? Like, I'm like, why? And then I feel kind of guilty because I need to start doing that as a parent. But he's definitely modeling it at my house. So.
Okay. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn tonight's
Okay.
meeting.
I'll second Kate.
Keith, all in favor? That's 6-0.